The European Union is an area of freedom, security, and justice. Our foundations were formed in the aftermath of World War II, with the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, which pooled the industries of war under a common high authority. Countries who were once enemies set out to achieve common goals through economic cooperation. From the original 6 members, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, the European Union has grown to incorporate 28 sovereign nations. These nations pool their sovereignty, and as a necessary requirement of this, member countries delegate aspects of their decision-making power to the institutions created by them to serve the common interest of all Europeans. Europe now faces a new challenge: climate change. It is no longer a distant threat, and around the world, many areas are already struggling to cope with rising temperatures. We have put our past differences behind us and are now poised to take on this challenge together. While some may argue that Europe's contribution to global warming has been through the annual release of hot tracks, the truth is that we, like the rest of the world, have been emitting our fair share of greenhouse gases. Emissions come from fueling our cars, powering our homes, farms and industries, and from our general household consumption, and when they are released into the atmosphere, they contribute to the warming of our planet. As more nations have joined the EU, our numbers have swelled to well over 500 million. That makes 500 million Europeans all working together to achieve our common goals.
Well, the EU will be affected significantly by climate change. Not only will there be significant environmental consequences, but economic ones as well. The European Commission estimates that the EU-wide cost of not adapting to climate change could reach at least €100 billion by the year 2020, rising to €250 billion by the year 2050. Generally, the environmental outlook is poor. The Netherlands, for example, faces a dire future from rising sea levels and erratic weather patterns, which could cause rivers to overflow. The Netherlands is a low-lying, densely populated country with a population of nearly 17 million people. 26% of its land area is below sea level, and approximately 50% of its land is 1 metre above sea level. A projected sea level rise of 49 to 59 centimetres by the end of the century would result in mass migration to higher-lying countries and huge devastation of life and property. The British Isles are also predicted to suffer from increased flooding, both coastal and from rivers and coastal erosion. This, like the scenario from the Netherlands, will result in inhabitants migrating away from rivers and coastal areas to areas of higher ground. These are only 2 brief examples of a massive problem. Other impacts include droughts and heat waves in southern Europe and the Mediterranean basin, increased melting of snow and ice in Europe's far north, Arctic and mountainous areas, and increasing intense rainfall, floods and storms in other areas of Europe. There will be benefits to the predicted higher temperatures in some regions of Europe. It is calculated that the warmer temperatures will increase agricultural yields in Northern Europe, which are Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, by up to 50%, and also to a lesser extent in the British Isles. Tourism will also be positively affected, with all regions, excluding Southern Europe, which consists of Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece and Bulgaria, seeing an increase in hotel bed nights as people will be reluctant to venture south for their holidays, unlike the current custom in Europe. These benefits, however, will not be enough to offset the issues of the negative impacts I've mentioned previously.
The European Union is made up of 13 institutions. Let's focus on the first 4, the European Parliament, the European Council, the Council of the European Union, and the European Commission. As you can see, the European Parliament is a directly elected EU body made up of 751 MEPs, members of the European Parliament, with legislative, supervisory and budgetary responsibilities. This is the EU's lawmaking body. The Parliament shares the role of being the main decision-making body with the Council of the European Union. The Council of the European Union is made up of ministers from each country. Which minister is present depends on the area of discussion. The Council meets to discuss and adopt laws and is able to commit their country to actions agreed upon at the meetings. The European Commission is not a political body, but is made up of one commissioner from each country. It proposes and enforces legislation passed by the Council of the European Union and Parliament, and also implements policies in the EU budget. Lastly, there's the European Council, which is different from the Council of the European Union. The European Council defines the EU's general political direction and priorities. This is made up of heads of states of member countries, as well as the European Commission.
The European Union is committed in preventing as many of the effects of climate change as possible, as well as reducing the damage inflicted by climate change. We've set ourselves strict targets. For example, we aim to cut greenhouse gas emissions to at least 20% below 1990 levels by 2020. This will be increased to 30% if other major economies commit themselves to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. By 2030, we aim to reduce greenhouse emissions by at least 40%, as well as ensuring that a minimum of 27% of our power comes from renewable sources. We have also committed to reduce our emissions by 80 to 95% of 1990 levels by 2050. We have also implemented an emissions trading scheme which places a cap on emissions from energy-intensive industries, which is lowered annually. The EU is continually improving the energy efficiency of electrical equipment and household appliances, as well as developing new technologies to trap and store CO2 emissions. Unfortunately, much of the damage has already been done. Even if all emissions stop today, those already in the atmosphere would continue to change the climate for decades to come. To account for this, we need to modify building regulations so they will better withstand the changing climate, build flood defences and develop drought-tolerant crops. A great deal of research is being done by the European Environment Agency, as well as universities and other research facilities around the world on the causes of climate change and how to best tackle this problem. From this information, the European Union have created policies, procedures and targets that we consider to be best possible practice for the worst possible problem. Just to give you a brief idea of what a dire situation the Netherlands is in, I've just included a couple of maps here. This one here shows the elevation of the Netherlands. As you can see, a good proportion of that is below sea level, about 50%, as I've said previously. This one here shows the population density of the entire country, and note too how the most densely populated areas are also in the lowest areas.
The Independent Policy Tracker, Climate Action Tracker, has given our targets a medium rating. We attribute this mainly to the challenges that naturally arise when engaging with the UNFCCC process as a regional economic interest that is party to the Convention. Of course, the stock standard challenges apply for addressing environmental concerns while maintaining economic growth, as well as protecting the interests of industry, including energy, airline and car manufacturing sectors. But these are challenges that apply across the board. The European Union is unique in that it is made up of 28 member states, and each of our member states, of course, have different needs and capabilities when it comes to adaptation and mitigation, which we must take into consideration when agreeing on common negotiating positions. We have countries such as Poland, who rely on coal-generated power for 90% of their electricity supply, and we have countries such as Germany, where we're seeing rapid decarbonising. So of course, representing member states at either end of this spectrum is something we have to be aware of and negotiate on internally. The EU looks forward to working with our partners across the world to address what is a truly global issue. We know that this requires us to work with governments, civil society, and industry alike. We start by welcoming China's efforts in rapidly reducing carbon intensity and recognise the role of the USA in their efforts to not only lead but to bring others along with them. Likewise, we applaud India's push in increasing the non-fossil fuel generated share of their energy supply and their emissions reduction target of above 30% on 2005 levels. Lastly, in addressing what our counterparts across the world have committed to, we congratulate Australia on their emissions reduction target, which is comparable to the US, but we hope they ensure that the mechanisms are in place to ensure this pledge is met. We know that for some this will not seem to be enough. To the least developed countries, we hear you. We have committed to making strong efforts to stay below 1.5 degrees of global warming. Trust in us that we are working hard to adapt and to mitigate. Between 2014 and 2020, at least 14 billion euros will be available to support action in developing countries, and we will contribute our fair share to the $100 billion fund to be available by 2025. At the same time, however, we are calling on emerging economies to contribute in line with their respective capabilities and responsibilities. To civil society groups, we encourage your engagement, but also encourage you to work with us, not against us. Just like we need to work with business, not against them, if we are to achieve anything. We are all here for a common goal. We want to echo the calls from the Catholic Church. The earth is our common home. Let us all choose the path of dialogue, solidarity, and cooperation. We will be ambitious but realistic in our targets. Committing to too much too fast will lead us nowhere. This is a big task we have ahead of us and one that needs careful consideration. Public support is generally strong in regards to an increase in the share of our energy production that comes from renewable energy, as well as energy efficiency measures. Though of course we must take into consideration opposing views on the matter, including on the cost-benefit viewpoint, and again consider industry concerns. While our own institutions, we believe, can smoothly navigate these challenges, global warming is of course a global problem, and we know that we as the European Union are not the be-all and end-all of addressing the issue at hand, and we encourage and hope to see key players, and indeed key polluters, such as the US and China, to take further action, and thus have offered to scale up our 2020 emissions cut another 10% if other major economies commit themselves to taking their fair share of global reduction efforts, as stated on Europe.eu.
We came together after the destruction now past, and now we must remain united as we face the potential destruction of our future. The European Union urges all nations who can to rise to the challenges facing our world and help to ensure the freedom, security, and justice of our future generations.
Waking in the rubble, walking over glass. Neighbors say we're trouble. Well, that time has passed. Peering from the mirror, no, that isn't me. A stranger getting nearer. Who can this person be? You wouldn't know me at all today. From the fading light I fly, rise like a phoenix out of the ashes, seeking rather than vengeance. Retribution you were warned. Once I'm transformed, once I'm reborn, you know I will rise like a phoenix, but you're my flame. Go about your business, act as if you're free. No one could have witnessed what you did to me, 'cause you